And it is now time for the Bell Breakdown. Film critic Josh Bell joining us today, sharing his reviews of two movies here. So first one, Terminator Dark Fate.
Yes.
I have not seen any of the Terminator movies, I told you that.
Yeah, if you haven't seen a Terminator movie, this is not the place to start. But if you have seen the Terminator movies, I love especially the original two, James Cameron's films, the original Terminator and Terminator 2, then I think there's something you can get out of this one. It's definitely the best Terminator in a while. There were a couple of really bad ones, the fourth and fifth. This is actually the sixth overall Terminator movie. The last two were pretty terrible, but now we've got, James Cameron is back, not as the director, but he contributed to the story, and he's one of the producers, so he's got some influence here on this one, and we've got Arnold Schwarzenegger back, as well as Linda Hamilton, who hasn't been in any of the films since Terminator 2 in 1991. So kind of getting the group back together. The story follows directly on from Terminator 2, which means they ignore the last three movies, which is a little confusing. It's kind of a trend that's been happening in movies lately. They did that with the most recent Halloween movie. But it allows these characters to come back without the baggage of those previous films. It's a fairly straightforward story for Terminator movies, which deal with time travel. Of course, we have the killer robot coming back from the future, in case you don't know what the Terminator movies are. But Schwarzenegger plays kind of a variation on that character here. He has a smaller role than Linda Hamilton does, who plays Sarah Connor, the woman who was targeted by the Terminator and is now kind of this hardened warrior. We've got some new characters. Mackenzie Davis is in this. Natalia Reyes is the woman who's now being targeted by the Terminator. The performances are decent. The effects are decent. It's a solid action movie. It's maybe not as great. I mean, I personally, Terminator 2 is one of my favorite movies ever. And so, to me, there's a lot to live up to here, and I don't think it quite gets there, but it's an improvement for this series, and if we're gonna have to get another Terminator movie, it's probably about the best we could hope for.
So real quick here, in the grand scheme of Terminator movies, where does this movie rank?
I would rank this, again, above the fourth and fifth ones, probably about on par with the third one, which is also just a fun action movie, but maybe not a great story.
All right, now moving on to Motherless Brooklyn. This is a period crime drama starring and directed by Edward Norton. Edward Norton is returning in this one, and I checked out the trailer. It does look a little bit windy, a little bit complicated, so tell us a little bit more about this.
Yeah, it is both windy and complicated. It is about 2.5 hours long. It's kind of this convoluted detective story set in 1950s New York City with Edward Norton as this kind of apprentice PI, and his boss, played by Bruce Willis, gets killed, and he's trying to figure out who did it, and he gets drawn into this large conspiracy that has to do with the gentrification of New York City at this time, and figure played by Alec Baldwin, who's sort of a city planner but is pulling the strings behind the scenes of things. And this is actually based on a novel from 1999 by Jonathan Lethem that was highly acclaimed, but Norton has changed almost everything about it. He moved the setting to the 1950s, he added this whole gentrification storyline, and a woman played by Gugu Mbatha-Raw, who's kind of sort of a love interest, sort of a femme fatale, sort of a co-protagonist along with Edward Norton. And it's interesting. It does get very convoluted and a bit hard to follow in sort of the tradition of movies like Chinatown, where it's trying to meld this corruption story with the mystery story about who killed Bruce Willis's character. It doesn't always work, but it has a lot of that noir style. I think there's some good suspense, car chase sequences and stuff. So if you like 50s noir style movies, there's something you can get out of this movie. But I wonder, for fans of the book, which I have not read, it changes so much that I think they'd probably just be irritated by it.
Yeah, you always have people who stick close to the book or prefer the movie version.
And it invents almost an entirely new story, just keeping the Edward Norton character who has these kind of Tourette's-like tics to him. So yeah, interesting, but maybe not quite entirely successful.
All right, so there you go. If that is your thing, though, worth checking out. And of course, that was Josh Bell with the Bell Breakdown. All right, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll be right back with an update on the Red Rock Scenic Drive Hours.